My name is Anonymous and I'm a man in my early 50s. I've been through things that I would not wish on my worst enemy. Life has taken me on a journey of pain, betrayal, and injustice. But today I'm telling my story, not just to share my pain, but to warn others. There is this cooking oil which I'll explain after my lifetime story. The cooking oil is deadly and is now cheap in many stores across South Africa. I served 14 years in prison for a crime I did not commit. And now that I'm out, I can't stay silent. You need to be very careful. But before I tell you about the cooking oil and how it destroyed my life, I need to take you back to where it all started. You need to understand who I was before that terrible day. I was born and raised in Lilongwe, Malawi, a city filled with hardworking people. Life was not easy, but it was not too hard either. We lived what I would call an average life. We had enough food on table to eat, a home to live in, and we were able to go to school. However, one thing made our life different from many others. We were living in a house owned by a family from Australia. This family did not live in Malawi, but they allowed us to stay in their house while they were away. They were very generous to us. Even though they were thousands of miles away, they made sure that we were taken care of. They paid off our fees, sent us money for food, and sometimes sent us gifts. We never had to struggle to pay rent or worry about where our next meal would come from. It was a comfortable life, and I was grateful for it. But all of that changed in a single moment. In every family, there is always that person who makes bad decisions. In my case, that person was my brother, my older brother. The Australian family who owned the house had an old car parked in the garage. Even though they did not use it, they loved it. It has sentimental value to them. Maybe it reminded them of their time in Malawi, or maybe it was a family heirloom. Whatever the reason, the car was important to them. One day, my brother did something that would change our lives forever. Without telling anyone, he found a buyer, took the money, and spent it after selling the car. I do not know what he used the money for. Maybe it was for drinking, gambling, or something else. But what I do know is that when the Australian family returned to Malawi and discovered that their beloved car was gone, they were furious. I will never forget the day they arrived. They walked into the house expecting to see everything as they had left it. But when they noticed the empty garage, everything changed. Where is the car? They asked. No one had an answer. My brother tried to lie, but the truth came out. They were so hurt and betrayed that they did not want to listen to any apologies. They told us to leave, just like that everything was taken from us. The house that had been our home for so many years was no longer ours. We were kicked out, left with nowhere to go. Losing that house was like losing everything. We had no money for rent, no one to pay for our school fees, and no guarantee of our next meal. We moved into a small overcrowded room in one of the poorest parts of Lilongwe. Life became a daily struggle. Before, we never had to worry about food. Now, some nights we went to sleep hungry. Before, we had nice clothes. Now, we wore the same torn clothes for months. Before, we went to school without stress. Now, we were chasing away because we couldn't pay fees. We're always being chased away at the school. The life we once knew was gone. At that moment, I knew I had to do something. I could not stay in Malawi and suffer. I made a decision that would change my life forever. One day, I told my family that I was leaving. I heard stories about people going to South Africa and finding work there. They said that in South Africa, you could make a good living if you work hard. I had no choice, no plan, no connections, no clear idea of where I would stay, but I knew I had to try. I packed a small bag with the few clothes I had and started my journey. Crossing the border to South Africa. Getting to South Africa was not easy first. I had to travel by bus, from Malawi to Zimbabwe. Crossing into Zimbabwe was not too difficult, but getting from Zimbabwe into South Africa was a different story. At the border, there were two choices: use legal papers and wait in long lines, find an illegal way to cross risking arrest. Since I had no proper travel documents, I had to use the second option. I followed a group of travelers who were crossing the border through the bushes. We walked for hours, avoiding police and border patrols. Many people were caught and sent back, but I was lucky. I made it to South Africa, but I had no idea what to do next. I arrived in Johannesburg with only a few coins in my pocket. Everything felt new, big, and dangerous. I did not speak good English. I did not know anyone. I did not even know where to sleep. For the first few nights, I slept on the streets. I went from shop to shop begging for work, but most people ignored me. Others laughed at me. I was about to lose hope when a woman offered me a job. She needed a gardener. She said I could stay in her servants' quarters and work for her. I did not think twice. I accepted. This woman would become my boss, and years later, the same boss would buy the cooking oil that would destroy my life. Ladies and gentlemen, uh, as we are about to continue the confession from the brother. After struggling on the streets of Johannesburg, I finally had a place to stay and a job. My new boss was a middle-aged woman who lived alone in a large house. She was not rich but managed her money carefully. She liked to buy cheap items, always looking for the lowest prices on everything: groceries, clothes, and even household supplies. At first, I was just grateful for the job. I worked as a gardener, cleaning the yard, watering the plants, and sometimes fixing small things around the house. She paid me a small salary, but since I had no rent to pay, I was able to send some money home to my family in Malawi. Life was not perfect, but compared to the suffering I had left behind, it felt like a blessing. One thing I quickly learned about my boss was that she never wanted to spend extra money on anything. She would rather buy something cheap than buy something of good quality. She would go to markets where vendors sold cheap and branded products. She would buy food from the street sellers instead of big supermarkets. She even bought expired items because they were sold at discount. I often worried about their choices, especially when it came to food. Madam, maybe you should buy fresh cooking oil, I once told her when she bought home a cheap and familiar brand. But she just laughed. Oil is oil, she said. It all tastes the same. I should have known that day a habit of buying cheap, cheap products would lead to disaster. For years, my life followed the same routine. I woke up early, working in the garden, cleaning the house, and helped with anything she needed. In the evenings, I would cook my own food, eat and rest. Sometimes I wanted to I walked to nearby shops just to get out of the house for a while. My boss was not a bad person, but she was also not very kind. She did not mistreat me, but she never really saw me as family. Either I was just a worker. But I accepted my life. I had no big dreams, no plans for the future. My goal was just to survive. And then, an ordinary day, everything changed. It was an ordinary afternoon when my boss came home with groceries. She had gone to one of her favorite markets where she always found the cheapest deals. As she unpacked the bags, I noticed something new: a plastic bottle of cooking oil with a blue sticker. On the sticker, there were three words written in red letters: Starled, now scared. I remember looking at that bottle and feeling something strange in my heart. The name itself sounded unnatural, almost like a warning, but I said nothing. My boss was happy. She told me she got it for a very low price. People are wasting money on expensive brands, she said. This one works just as well. She put it in the kitchen and went on with her day. That evening, my boss cooked a big meal using the new cooking oil. The smell filled the house and my stomach rumbled. But something unexpected happened. Just before dinner, she sent me to town on an errand. Go and buy something quickly, she said. Since it was a long trip, I ate something small in town before coming back home. By the time I returned, everyone in the house had already finished eating. That was the only reason I survived. Around midnight, I woke up to a strange noise. At first, I thought I was dreaming, but then I heard it again, glooming and coughing and crying. I got up and rushed to my boss's bedroom. She was on the floor, clutching her stomach, struggling to breathe. Her face was twisted in pain. I ran to the kitchen, but then I noticed something even worse. The housemaid was also on the floor, barely moving. I felt my heart pounding in my chest. Something was very wrong. I grabbed my phone and called for help, but help could arrive. My boss took her last breath. She was gone. By the time the ambulance arrived, my boss and the housemaid were both dead. The police were also called. They started asking me questions. What happened? They asked. I was shaking. I don't know. They were fine earlier. They just ate the dinner. It was the only new thing in the house. It had to be the cause, the cooking oil. I told the police about it, but they did not believe me. Instead, they turned against me. The police started their investigations, but I quickly realized that something was not right. Instead of focusing on the cooking oil, they focused on me. They brought me the man who sold the oil to my boss. I was sure he would admit that something was wrong with it. But instead, he looked at me and said, "This man was asking about poison 2 days ago." I felt like the ground has disappeared beneath me. "What? That's a lie," I shouted. But it was too late. The man had used juju to twist the truth suddenly. All the evidence pointed at me. I was arrested. The court said I'd poisoned my boss. They said I wanted to steal from her. No one listened when I explained about the cooking oil. No one cared about the truth. I was sentenced to 14 years in prison for murder. I'd lost everything. Prison was a living hell. I was locked up with criminals, murderers, robbers, and violent men. Every day was a fight for survival. Food was terrible. The guards were cruel. Some prisoners had been inside so long they no longer acted human. I tried myself to sleep many nights, but no matter what, I never lost hope. I kept telling myself one day the truth will come. When I was finally released, the world had changed. But one thing shocked me more than anything. I saw the same cooking oil still being sold in some stores. After all these years, it was still out there. I can't stay silent. If you ever see cooking oil with a blue sticker that says STARTLED, now scared, do not buy it. I lost 14 years of my life because of it. My boss and their housemate lost their lives. This is my story. This is my warning. Please be careful. Thank you so much, my brother, for sharing your story. As Christians, we believe that the enemy often uses deception to bring harm to people. The Bible warns us in 2 Corinthians chapter 11, verse 14. And no wonder, for Satan himself masquerades as an angel of light. This means that not everything that looks good or seems harmless is truly safe. Be watchful and discern what you consume. The Bible tells us in 1 Peter chapter 5 verse 8, be sober-minded, be watchful. Your adversary, the devil, prowls around like a rolling lion, seeking someone to devour. As believers, we must be cautious about the things we bring into our houses, especially food, clothing, and household items. Just because something is cheap or looks normal does not mean it is safe, ladies and gentlemen. Just because something is cheap or looks normal, it doesn't mean it is safe. Pray over everything you buy and consume. 1 Timothy chapter 4, verse 4 to 5 says, for everything God created is good, and nothing is to be rejected if it is received with thanksgiving, because it is consecrated by the word of God and prayer. before cooking, before eating, and before using any new product, pray over it and ask God to sanctify it. Avoid greedy and dishonest sellers. Yes, let's avoid that. Greedy and dishonest sellers. Let's avoid them. Many people do not care about the safety of others, they only care about their profit. The Bible warns us in Proverbs chapter 11, verse 1. The Lord detests dishonest scales, but accurate ways find favor with you. Always be careful where you shop. If a deal seems too good to be true, ask yourself why. Some businesses operate under evil influences. Do not be silent. Expose evil. Ephesians chapter 5, verse 11 commands us. You have nothing to do with the fruitless deeds of darkness, but rather expose them. If you come across a dangerous product, warn others. Do not assure that someone else will speak up. Your warning could save a life. To you, my brother, who has shared this painful confession, I want to remind you that God sees everything, even through men, even though even though men judged you unfairly. God sees everything, even though men judged you unfairly. God knows the truth. You are not forgotten by God. Isaiah chapter 41, verse 10 says, Do not fear, for I am with you. Do not be dismayed, for I am your God. I will strengthen you and help you. I will uphold you with my righteous right hand. Even though you suffered in prison, God never left you. He brought you out, and He still has plan for your life, my brother. Your testimony will save lives. Your testimony will save lives. Thank you so much for sharing this testimony with us. We have learned from your story. Listeners, that was it for now. Until we meet again in the episodes. Bye for now.